Best Practices and Lessons Learned 2021. We are going to start our next session in 2 to 3 minutes, and I would like to introduce the next presenter to all of you. Ms. Afroza Akhter Tina. She's going to present on the topic Use of Alternative Assessments in Everyday Classroom Practices, an experience sharing from an online EFL class. A little about our presenter here. Ms. Afroza serves as a senior lecturer in the Department of English at Daffodil International University, Bangladesh. She is also a teacher trainer and an e-teacher, alumni of the US Department of State, Dhaka, Bangladesh. With academic publications and presentations in different national and international conferences, she has earned inspiration to continue with her research interest, which includes assessment, learner autonomy, teacher education, ELT, and sociolinguistics. Ms. Afroza, are you ready to share your screen now?
Well, hello, Ms. Shazia. I think Ms. Afroza is just joining. She's joining us now. I'm sharing her screen.
Okay, we hold on. There she is. Okay, great. You may start when you're ready, Ms. Afroza.
I'm ready.
Okay, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, and it's good afternoon over here in Bangladesh. First of all, I'd like to express my gratitude to the authority for, giving me this wonderful opportunity to share my ideas, my experiences with so many wonderful educators and teachers worldwide. So thank you, Educational Webinar Jam, for that. Well, as you can see that today my presentation topic concerns use of alternative assessments in everyday classroom practices, and definitely an experience sharing from EFL classes. As I am an English teacher, English language teacher, so obviously I will be focusing on how actually to assess learners through different alternative tools when we think of teaching and learning English as a second language or foreign language. Now, this is Afroza Akhter Tina. I work as a senior lecturer in the Department of English at Daffodil International University over here in Bangladesh. I'm also an e-teacher alumna of the US Department of State, Dhaka, Bangladesh. Now, I believe we all know what is an alternative assessment, but still, let us, refresh kind of things that, yes, we know that through alternative assessments, we assess our learners, not usual ways, the usual ways. It's not about some specific formative or summative kind of assessment. Rather, it's, different from those specific types. And definitely the alternative assessments require extended time, complex thinking, and integration of subject matter learning. And that is why it's important. And also it determines what students can.
Excuse me, my apologies for interrupting you, but could you please start the slideshow so that the audience can actually see your screens in a better way? If you can just start the slideshow, click on the cup. Yeah, thank you.
Can you see now?
Yes, thank you very much.
Welcome. So it also determines, as I was mentioning, that alternative assessments definitely determines what students can and cannot do, in contrast to what they do or do not know actually in the class. And yes, of course, we have been talking about the differences between traditional and alternative types. Since when we even don't know. But yes, there are some differences, of course, because traditional assessment tools require learners to display their knowledge in a predetermined way. So obviously, as teachers, we know that we have to follow, traditional assessments most of the time to assess our learners, because we have specific lessons, lesson plans. We have a specific syllabus, content to cover. So yes, we actually like to, assess our learners through the traditional tools or platforms. But alternative assessments focus on the growth and the performance of the student. And this is the beauty of this alternative assessment. And that is why my focus today is on this type of assessment. And there are so many different types of alternative assessment, thousands of ideas. And I have just picked up very few for you. For example, the first one, we may plot a family tree. We may conduct an interview. We may create an infographic. Assessing learners through, images, information, graphics, animation, writing how-to manual. So manual writing manually every day, sequentially maybe, and also presenting opposite points of view, producing multimedia or interactive posters, which is also very wonderful. I have practically tried this, in my classes. Designing travel brochure, this can be very, very good with, tourism and hospitality management students, who knows? And then reflection diaries, then dramatization, which is very, very popular when we think of teaching literature courses. And also gathering real world examples. That's also wonderful. Connecting with real world. Portfolio assessment. Just before my presentation, I was, listening to a presentation which focused on this portfolio type of assessment, which was wonderful. We had some wonderful examples over there. And also we have observation-based assessment and questionnaire surveys, assessment cards. So, well, as I have mentioned, there are so many, but these are very few which I wanted to mention during my presentation today. Now, let us directly focus into the assessment types that today I have a plan to focus on. And yes, to measure students' gradual development, well, let us focus on these two types first. The first one is reflection diaries and e-portfolios. Now, we have just been through a presentation which focused on portfolios. Maybe I don't know, maybe I have missed whether that also focused on e-portfolios or not. But yes, of course, there are so many ways as we are online these days. So obviously, we can't be physical in the classrooms. We are not physically present in front of each other in the classroom. So that is why when we think of online teaching and learning, developing an e-portfolio definitely gives a huge exposure and definitely, engages our learner throughout. It can. And apart from that, reflection diaries also could be a wonderful tool. And then the next two different types of alternative assessments. In total, actually, I'm going to focus on 4 different types today. And the next 2 types will be using individual assessment cards and the use of progressive I can statements. So there are thousands of tools or strategies to assess learners, alternatively, but today my presentation would specifically focus on these 4 types. As I have mentioned, reflection diaries, e-portfolios, individual assessment cards, and progressive I can statements. Now, if you look at the very first box, before this, at the top of individual assessment cards, it's clearly written instant feedback for learner training. Maybe you could connect that this assessment card could be used to collect instant feedback from the learners. And apart from that, at the top of progressive I can statements, you can clearly see it's written promoting learner confidence. So maybe you get the idea that this specific type of alternative assessment can actually give our learners confidence. So that is why, these 4 types are so very important. Now, as we have heard so many things about portfolios, so I'm not going to actually get into the details regarding this, but definitely I would like to mention that this interactiveness of portfolio assessment encourage and develop a relationship between student, teacher, and teacher parent. So this interaction actually regarding portfolio could encourage and develop the relationship, different types of relationship. It could not only between, I mean, student or teacher student, rather it could develop a very good relationship between a teacher and a parent. So that is why it's so important. And specifically when we think of e-portfolios, well, definitely they have emerged as very, very important assessment, alternative assessment, specifically these days when we are, in this pandemic. And this can provide a more flexible, less cumbersome and longer term record of a student's development of a program's performance. And what does an e-portfolio contain? Well, there is no limit. There is no limit, and no one can say, particularly these 4 or 5 are the things that should be in the portfolio. Of course, it depends on the learner's need. It depends on the level of the learner. Sometimes it can also depend on the requirements regarding the coursework. So it depends totally on the teacher and the student. But these 5 are some very important things with which we can think on, files of different types of files. And that may include text, pictures, videos, and then we may include writing samples. We may include projects. We may include classwork, homework. We may also request our students to include their, performances, extracurricular activities or performances. So this is how we can design, make it exclusive. Now, let us talk a little bit about the reflection diaries. And this is also a very, very significant kind of alternative assessment, a tool. And definitely, this here, we can request our students to reflect on some specific points. So look at the term reflection. Reflective diaries actually could be very, very exclusive reflection on part of the students, and they may include the teaching learning activities that have taken place, throughout the coursework. This may also provide opportunity for them to search for and express their learning in a personal way. So why not including personal notes as well, apart from including those teaching learning activities? And also, why not relating and applying this learning to their teaching and assessment practice? So let them also think how to relate the teaching learning with the assessment. So these could be different types of reflection, which we may request our students to include in their reflection diaries. And also, I believe that through this way, students will be actively engaged throughout the entire learning process. It would also increase their interest, motivation, and sometimes it may also empower them to be more responsible to their own learning. And this obviously could be a very good reflection regarding their own performances and development. And finally, we may also request them to share their ideas through speaking, which may also focus on not only, writing or expressing ideas or critical thinking. Rather, it may also encourage them to focus on communication skills and developing speaking. Why not? Now, what do we actually need? We actually need build-up feedbacks on their works and documentation. Now, whatever we do, whatever kind of tools or strategies or techniques we talk, the most important things are our students need feedback, our learners need feedback on their performances, and these need to be documented. So documentation is very, very important as part of the teacher's work, Now, let us focus on the next one, the third one, which is using individual assessment cards. And as I have mentioned already, that this specific kind of card can be very, very useful in terms of collecting instant feedback after a single or individual lesson. Now, let me share the idea with you that Clive Lovelock, who is a Japanese English teacher, developed this process of assessment in 1996. I was very much motivated, and practically I found this very, very engaging, while experimenting this with my students. And the basic purpose was to make students learn basic communication skills and also developing learning skills. So that was his focus. Now, there were four guiding principles when we think of assessment cards. The first one, if we start with top bottom, obtaining, storing, retrieving, and using the language, and obviously English language. And the next one, active involvement in the learning process, and then how to develop their consciousness. And finally, at the left, you can see that this also focuses on social strategies and different types of communication strategies. So from this, I guess you could get the idea how important an assessment card could be. Now, this is the specific assessment card of Lovelock. Lovelock developed this assessment card for his specific group of students. And as you can see, this card has details of the students, name, number, class, and it also has attendance and absence and score. And look at the column. We can actually extend the column. We can include columns and rows as many as we can. So there is no limit, but this is the kind of format, that he developed. This is one side of the card and this is the other side of the card. So each card has actually two sides. This is the other side of the card. And as you can see here, the numbers of the classes could be also recorded, classes 1 to 12, 13 to 24. And here, as you can see, there are a lot of keywords which can be put over here. We can also design the keywords according to our own way. And now let me share my assessment, my customized assessment card with you, because the earlier card that I have just showed to you, actually that has been designed by Lovelock, but according to my need, according to my students' need, according to my lesson, I actually customized this assessment card this way. As you can see, I have included the keys the way I want. For E, I have written communicates in English. So I should know whether my students communicated in English or not in Bangla. Bangla is our mother tongue in Bangladesh over here. For Q, I wrote ask questions when he or she doesn't understand. So this is how, I have designed the key the way I wanted. And as you can see, students are required, are advised to fill up the cards on their own. So this will be a task of the student. So if a student feels that, yes, I have completed E, then he will give a tick over there after E. If he or she feels that, yes, I have completed Q, then he would put a tick over here after Q. So this is how, we can make the class engaging, and we can engage our students. We can make them do actually stuff on their own. So they should be involved and they should know how actually they are performing. It's not about that we always say that, well, you have performed well, or you got A plus, or you got 80 out of 100. It's not always like that. I mean, let our students, assess themselves as well. Now, the last assessment tool that I would like to mention is using progressive I can statement. As I have mentioned, that this can definitely motivate our learner, and this can develop our learner confidence. And how? It's also a strategy which has been developed by Fife McDuff, Khadija Al-Haik, and Caroline Lindsay. So these three people developed this strategy, and this can create opportunities for students to state what they perceive they're able to do, which can be referred to as I can statements. For example, they may say after a lesson that I can write about daily activities in English if they have learned something regarding how to communicate in everyday life, for example. So after a lesson like that, he or she may simply say, well, now I can write about daily activities in English. And these are some interesting ways through which it can work. If you want, I may share the slides with you later, because I believe that, yes, of course, this particular strategy could be very, very useful when we think of elementary and middle school teachers. Very, very interesting, because students would love it, believe me. And yes, of course, it's not like that we can't apply this strategy with advanced level of learners. Of course, it's not like that. As I have mentioned, as teacher, I have that freedom, to customize the tool the way I want. For example, as you can see at the very first point, if they are very, elementary students, I can provide them single I can statement. For example, after an essay writing class, I can give them a statement like, now I can write descriptive essay. Now I can write compare contrast essay, something like this, and student will take that, student will write these statements on their own so that they can feel that, yes, now I am confident enough to express the idea that I can now write a compare contrast essay or something like that. If they are advanced level of learners, obviously we can, request them to come up with their own I can statements. Well, there a teacher may request the students to come up with the students' own, reflection. So why only giving I can statement? Why we would give I can statements every time? If it's an advanced level of class, well, we may request our learners to come up with their own ideas. To come up with some 10 or 15 I can statements, to which, well, I would be able to understand that, yes, now you are ready, actually how to write a compare contrast essay or something like that. This is an activity, this is an example which I usually did with my students in one of the reading skills classes. Well, I gave them a passage, a text actually, which was on Athens and Sparta. And this was the question: where would you rather live and why? So after reading the handout, write an argumentative essay, and they were supposed to assess their writing with the help of I can statements. So I actually gave them 10 I can statements, and they were supposed to write an argumentative essay after completing this second task. So if a student says that, yes, I have understood everything, I have clicked all the 10 statements, so that is when I can expect that my students is now able to essay, something like this. And well, these are some specific learning objectives which can definitely be achieved if we try to, utilize the tools, customize the tools the way we want. These are wonderful opportunities, wonderful ideas. And yes, this is a sample which I'd like to share with you all. And it focuses on the, bottom-up approach. For example, at level 1, you can see these two statements. Level 2, maybe these two statements would help the learners to identify. And at level 3, finally, they may come up with these kind of statements. So this is a sample, simply a sample after that specific task, which I have just mentioned that I gave in one of my reading skills classes. And well, apart from all these, there are some disadvantages of using alternative assessments as well. Well, yes, of course, there could be some disadvantages because sometimes it's hard to evaluate. It's hard to evaluate when we think of alternative tools. And yes, process can be costly in terms of time, effort. Definitely, I also feel that, well, time is required, enough time. And rating process, yes, sometimes could be more subjective than traditional exams. And sometimes, not every time, but sometimes inaccurate reflection of student progress and knowledge, could be there in front of our eyes. So which may also distract us, sometimes. But yes, apart from all these, I think that there are a lot of advantages rather than disadvantages when we think of, using alternative assessments. Now, after receiving feedback, there are definitely some responsibilities. Whatever we do, we receive feedback from our students. And well, as teachers, our task is to note down these significant points regarding the lesson teaching that we receive from our students and improvising the lesson plan if needed, improving our teaching, of course, because at the end of the day, if we are teachers, we need to improve our teaching, and this is a continuous process. We can't say that I had training, 5 years ago, and that is how I became a teacher, and I didn't receive any further training after that. Then obviously, well, there would be some people who won't consider me as an updated teacher. So that is why we'll have to be updated every time. And yes, sharing through Moodle, Padlet, Google Classroom. Now, I have mentioned different types of tools, alternative tools, but how actually we can share them? Well, I would like to mention Moodle over here, which I personally use in my university. At Daffodil International University, we use Moodle as the blended learning platform. And Moodle is such a wonderful platform where there is the opportunity to embed so many different things. We can embed so many things. So even if you think of reflection diaries, even if you think of Padlet, Google Classroom, we can embed actually all of them in Moodle. So one platform, but having so many varieties of things, you know, so many different types of engagements to engage our learners. And yes, I have mentioned so many things, but what would be my role as a teacher? So many, so many. I'll have to be a controller, organizer, participant with my students, assessor, prompter, resource person, tutor, observer, so many. I have actually various roles, of course. And finally, at the end, I'd like to end with this specific idea. Well, knowing what students know is important. I repeat, knowing what students know is important when we think of, an effective teaching learning environment. So that was all from my part. Now, I would definitely like to answer your queries or questions if you have any. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Afroza. That was a very informative discussion indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions, you may ask now. Thank you. Or you may post them in the chat box.
And I would also like to mention in this regard that I can see, you know, some of my students also as participants over here. And this gives me so much pleasure when I see that my students actually are also interested to learn, you know, different types of things. They're interested to know, explore more. And yes, thank you so much, everyone, for joining the session today. Now, if you have any questions, anyone.
Okay.
Thank you, madam. Can I ask you a question?
Yes, of course.
Okay, I'm going to ask you about Moodle. Is it for free or you have to, or we have premium one? You said that you can embed everything or a lot of things in this software Moodle, or I don't use it. I have.
A wonderful question. Thank you so much for the
Welcome.
wonderful question. Yes, a very important one as well. Moodle actually in my university is free. In my university, you know, we have updated this Moodle in such a way. Well, you would love to see that someday. If possible, I'd like to share that someday if you need, because we can embed so many different things over there. So just one platform and embedding different tools, you know, make our students enthusiastic. To look at the course, what are there in the course? How would I proceed? You know, how would my teacher assess me, or what different kinds of variations, you know, my teachers actually put over there on Moodle. Yes, it's totally free actually in my university, but overall, actually, I'm not sure whether it's a free platform for everyone worldwide or not.
Okay, so sorry to interrupt you, but I guess you are teaching a little bit adult learners. I teach in the middle school or sometimes in high school. So if a model goes smoothly with these, age learners, middle school, for example, a lot of people using Padlet or using Google Classroom. So I'm asking your advice if I'm going to use, for example, Moodle or Google Classroom or Padlet. This is my question.
Yes, thank you so much for the question. Well, actually, there isn't any limitation of the platforms, and well, specifically, it's difficult to say which platform is better than the other. Well, let us not compare. But the thing is, if you feel that through Google Classroom, you can definitely engage your learner. You can definitely have that kind of reflection from your learners. Then why not using Google Classroom? You know, before Moodle in my university, most of the teachers used Google Classroom, most of the teachers. But now actually we all are using Moodle because of so many different types of advantages. But yes, through Google Classroom, you can definitely, as you have mentioned, that you are probably school teacher, and sometimes you teach maybe middle school students. Yes, you can definitely have reflection through Google Classroom. You may try reflection diaries, and why not e-portfolios as well? Because students, after preparing their e-portfolios in Google Drive, they may share the links through Google Classroom, and all the links actually would be clearly visible in front of you. So I believe e-portfolios and reflection diaries could be very, very, effectively used through Google Classroom.
Okay, one last question about assessment. Do you think it's can you control learners while they've got tests? I don't trust them at all. I need them face to face in order to test their learning process. So how do you assess using online teaching? This is my last question. Thank you in advance.
Thank you so much, Labidi, Mr. Labidi. Thank you so much. Well, if you think of general assessment, I believe your question is not alternative assessment, but generally, how do I assess my learners? Was that your question? Yes, yes.
Yes.
Thank you so much for the question. Now, I'm very glad, to share the answer with you. That's because my students are also over here. Some of my students are also present here in this session, so they know how do I assess. The way you mentioned that you actually are not, you cannot trust your students all the time because it's online. Now, what do? I specifically focus on one strategy. The very first thing that my students have to ensure that they have not copied, because each of the answer goes through plagiarism check. Each of the answer. So if they have copied, my students, they are present here, they know that Tina ma'am actually doesn't give us scores. If we copy, our madam is not going to give us any scores. So they try to, paraphrase. They focus on paraphrasing. They try to revise the language, the style. They think on their own. They think of the vocabulary on their own. This is how they try to, organize the answers. So I believe if you can, give this assurance to students that yes, if you can try on your own, I'm going to give you scores. Okay. I mean, well, even if you have thousands of errors, I'm going to give you scores. But if you are copying, I'm not going to give you a single score. I think this can motivate students. Of course, I'm sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss.
Thank you, Mrs. Afroza. We have time for just one more question. In the chat box, we have a question from Mr. Waller. He asks, what kind of learner training do you do to support your students to help them engage with alternative assessment? The type of training you do.
Very important question. Thank you so much. Well, yes, of course, that is important because obviously, if suddenly I enter into the class and talk about alternative assessment tools, my students actually won't get any ideas because they are not familiar. They're not familiar. So yes, I'll have to give them ideas, enough ideas on the types, on the tools, that this is how I'm going to assess you. For example, when I mentioned about one of my reading skills classes, obviously my students actually knew that this is how my teacher is going to assess. I mean, this is how we would use the progressive I can statements. So I have explained them everything in details, and this actually took around 2 classes. I mean, in total 3 hours, and later they had some written instructions as well in Moodle. So not only oral discussion, but written instructions in front of me will definitely would ensure that yes, now I know that after the lesson, my teacher actually will be trying to, develop my confidence through this type of progressive I can statements, which I'll have to click. If I understand, I'll have to tick. If I didn't understand, if I don't get something, obviously I won't click. I won't give it a tick. Then I would definitely ask my teacher a question to clarify that specific point. So yes, obviously, discussion orientation is very, very important before trying this type of tools, obviously in the classroom. Thank you.